Here's an instructional video on how to work with some basic forms and letters in one-point perspective. So let's start with, in the middle of your paper, a very light line, because you would erase this later. But this kind of gives you an idea, this horizon line, or this, think of it as line of sight, that tells you that if these are our eyes, we would see underneath the bottom of the shapes anything above that line, versus line of sight, everything below that we would see more of the tops of our forms. So, and anything on that line, you're going to only see the sides, so you wouldn't see the top or the bottom. And then in the center, go ahead and put your vanishing point. And during this video, I'm going to let you all work at your own pace, especially because we're going to be working with a lot of different forms, and I want you to be able to kind of stop and go as you need to, so that you can kind of go at your own pace. So let's start with something similar to that, something that we've already practiced with, but this time, what if instead of a cube, it's more of a long rectangular form? So let's start this at the bottom right. We're going to start with more of a rectangular box. So the sides are parallel here and then parallel up here. So should start with the rectangle. Go ahead and pause the video and connect this to the vanishing point. And instead of it going, all the way to the vanishing point, remember we're going to shorten it up so that it's separate from the vanishing point, so it doesn't look like it's a mile long. All right, so go ahead and pause the video and let's see how you do. Okay, so let's find out if your rectangle looks like mine. Should be connecting the corners. Now, when I go to each corner to connect it with the vanishing point, you may have connected this corner, which is fine. That's what you would do if the shape was, let's say, see-through, like it's made of glass, or you want to make it look like it is hollow inside. We'll come back to that. But if you notice that you go to connect a corner and it cuts through the shape, you can skip over it and save yourself time to end up erasing the lines, or maybe you just get really overwhelmed with all of the lines. And remember to draw lightly when you're creating a converging line. So, like I said, I skipped that one because it's cutting through the front of the shape and it's not see-through. And then I'm going to show an end point for the front of this rectangular box. This is the front right here. So if I line up my ruler here and pull it out, and I just kind of, if I end it down here, it's going to make it look like this box goes really far. If I just want it to look like it's a little bit shorter and closer, then this line needs to stay somewhat close here. So this first line is parallel to this. I'm showing that this is the side of my box. But now, because I've made this point, it decides how far out this line's going to go. So I'm going to line up my ruler here and pull it back. We're going to come back to this form in a little bit, and I'll show you some other things we can do with it. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and erase here, and your rectangular box should look like this. And if these are lines you're going to keep, you can darken them a little bit. Make sure that you're not using a drawing pencil, and if you are, because that's the only pencil you have, make sure it's a 2B so it's not staining the paper. Let's talk about drawing something that's other than a box, but maybe a triangular form. So here, I'm thinking the bottom left, go ahead and draw a triangle. I'm gonna draw it out, and then I'll give you a minute to see how it would look to connect it. Okay, so a triangle, what would you do to connect it to the vanishing point and shorten it up? All right, let's see how you did. So this is now the side that's facing me, because that's always how one point is. And then now it's stretching to an endless point, but now we want to shorten it up. And that triangle becomes more of a prism, or a pyramid, I should say, pyramid. So line up your ruler, and I'm pulling it back to keep that same angle. So these should be parallel to one another. Now, if I could see through this, I would then also connect that corner, if you want to see how that would look. So I should say, I'm going to erase this so you can see. You probably have it set up like this, but let's say I could see through it. You could take that corner and then match up the angles. So the bottom of this, move that back till it gets to this point. So it's almost like a mini triangle within a mini triangle. This just kind of helps you understand the form a little bit better. It should stop there, and then this angle should stop there. And then I would erase this point. And I'm going to darken just a little bit the triangle that's closest to me. When things are like thicker, when lines are thicker, they tend to stand out a little bit more. That way this looks like it's on the inside, so it looks a little transparent. Okay, so if you didn't do this, go ahead, take a moment and see if you can show your triangular pyramid to make it, not a pyramid, prism, to look like what I have. So go ahead and pause and see if you can get that. All right, so hopefully it looks like this. Let's try thinking of something that is circular in form. So I'm going to take something that's about 1 inch wide to 2 inches, and I'm going to trace it out so that I get what's going to end up being a cylinder. So if that cylinder is facing me, I would see a circle on one side. So you trace out your circle. Go ahead and do that now. Feel free to pause. Draw out your circle. All right, so let's connect our circle that's then going to become a cylinder. So if I line up my ruler with this vanishing point, and as I'm connecting it to the circle, as soon as it touches the outer edges, that's when I'm going to connect it, because that's the furthest point of that circle. Same thing on this side. Connect my ruler with the vanishing point, and then slowly bring it towards the circle. As soon as it touches the farthest point, that's where you're going to make your line. So now I have this cylinder that's coming towards me. This is the front of it, and it's going on for miles and miles into the distance. I want to shorten it up. So what I'm going to do is, because this is a curve here, you want to mimic that degree of curve where it ends. So instead of drawing a straight line across, you have to make sure that this degree of curve, just like before being parallel, the same curve here needs to be this curve here. So if this is where I wanted it to end, I would take this curve and recreate it here. It's not very steady. Sometimes you can reuse some of the things that you traced, but chances are it may not, because it's only taking that section, it may not match the degree of curve, but just kind of take your time and turn your paper if you need to get a steadier hand. So there is my cylinder shape. So this becomes the front, this becomes the side. And depending on where you put this, it would look the same all around. Even if it was here, we would see the side. Even if it was up here, we would see the side of it, but underneath. So I should say the side more of the top. Let's talk about letters. You could try your own letter if you want to see how it turns out. I'm gonna work with the letter L. Nice thing about doing the same letters that I'm working with is you can see how yours turned out and compare it. In the upper left-hand corner, let's draw a letter L. How do you make what was once a line look like a form? Well, if I'm thinking of it 3D, think about how it looks to face the letter L. So you need to make this kind of like a box L. We read it like a letter, but think of it like a shape. It has, goes down and then it goes across. So I started with that L like I would with, like if I had to write it, but then thinking about it in a shape form that's facing us, and then it'll become a form once I have the converging lines. So I kind of sketched it in lightly and now I'm using my ruler to get the L shape. All right, so a letter L. Let's talk about how to put that L in perspective so we don't just see the front of it, but we can see the sides. So I'm going to check each corner here and line it up with the vanishing point. Go ahead and pause the video if you want to go ahead and draw your letter, just the front of it, and maybe it's a letter L. Okay, so you have your L. Let's start checking the corners to see which ones connect with the vanishing point. That one, this one, this corner. If I check this one, it cuts through the L, so I'm not going to put that point, but then I have this point. Make sure you draw your lines light, especially when you know that it could run through another part of your letter. For example, if the vanishing point was more here and I tried to bring that down, it would cut into the letter. So if you end up running into this main part, stop, because you won't have to go all the way through. And then checking this point, it cuts through the front of the letter, so I'm not going to connect that corner. All right, so let's show where the letter L ends. For example, the whole side of it's just going for miles on end. So I want to give it an end point. So I'll just start with this line here. It really doesn't matter which one you start with, but wherever you start, that's going to decide how far out, how wide your letter is going to be. So let's say I start here. Just line up your ruler. I'm going to bring it back, keeping it parallel. And then I'm going to put this line here to get this line. I know it's got to connect with this corner just like it connects here. So I line up this, pull it back. Once it connects, I now have that side of the letter L. So on this side, I'll be honest, sometimes I kind of eye it, but if we want to make sure that this line is accurate, technically, it would need to connect. It would still be parallel to this, but it should match up with this here. If I was creating this, like you could see through it, that would tell me how far I need to take it out because of this line and then where this connects. But sometimes I just eye it, to be honest, but that's how we would get that accuracy there. This point, vertical line up, and that tells me how far I need to take that. Now, if you put your line here, for example, this is really wide, and then this is really thin, so that's why that wouldn't make sense. So they have to, the thickness has to match up, and that corner is what's going to help me identify how far to bring this line out. Okay. thinking about that corner and that moved over. It'd be more like out here. See, I'm already correcting myself. Just kind of thinking that's that line for that point, but it's over this way, so it'd be that far. Okay. All right. Then I erase the rest of the lines. Let's see if your letter L looks like mine. I feel like that is really stretched out far, so maybe it's not as wide as that. Maybe I feel like, hey, this letter L is way too long. Could definitely shorten it up. So this line that was going there, I'm gonna shorten it up. This angle. That way it looks more like an L and not like a chair. There we go. That feels more like a letter L. Sorry about that. Hopefully I didn't mess anybody up. Okay. What about something that is circular and has sharp angles? Let's try working with what I like to call the Pacman. So go ahead and draw a circle. Give you a minute if you want to draw it and pause the video. Okay, go ahead and put a circle above the vanishing point and to the left a little bit, like mine, or somewhere above it. That would be fine. Now take, if we're thinking of Pacman, take your ruler and cut open the mouth. And then just erase this. So remember, this is the front of the flat shape. Pacman is just a shape. And we're going to connect it to the vanishing point. So make sure you get here. And then let's go ahead and connect our sides, just like we did before. Farthest point. And then these now have corners. It's not smooth, so I need to connect all of these corners. And the corner inside here. Oh, slightly got off. I think that's... Okay, so now all the corners are connected, but I'm not going to keep it this way. It's not going to go for miles and miles. I'm going to shorten it up. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, this is a lot easier because I can line up my ruler, but this is where I'm going to have to work with the degree of curve. So I'm going to start with this one, lining up my ruler, and that's going to decide how thick this form becomes. So I pull this out. That becomes the inside of that. And then this point and this angle will help me get this here. So I'm lining up my ruler and pulling it back, making this line here. So that gives me the inside. I'm just going to put some lines here so you kind of helps visually see the inside of the Pacman. And then now this point here needs to have this degree of curve here. Same thing on this side. This degree of curve, this degree of curve. And it points, it matches up with those points there. So you end up with the other side. And then you erase all the lines you don't need anymore. The converging lines. Gave you those angles. Kind of looks like a block of cheese. We'll be talking about like shading and things like that to make them look more form-like. Right now we're just working on the perspective part. What about if you wanted to add, let's say, a hole inside of one of your forms to make it look hollow? you could, if we go back to this one, let me show you after drawing it out. What if I wanted to make look like it's paper thin? Like it's a piece of paper folded into a box. You could go back and take that corner runs into the shape, stop. And then this way it ends up looking like this is the inside here. Sometimes I like to draw a little stick man figure so you get an idea of he's standing here, and then this is the wall inside. This is still the top of the box, the side of the box. But what if you have a form that maybe has like a window cut out? So I'm going to go ahead and draw let's say like a 5-sided shape. This will probably be our most complex one. So we're going to add kind of a complex shape with actually making it hollow at some point too. So let's see what we get here. I'm just going to try and draw at least 5 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll just put my last line here, so 5. All right, so each of these I'm going to connect to the corner, so go ahead and show the other sides before I even start talking about making it hollow. Corner. Let's see. Yep, I get just a little bit of this edge here. If it was further in, I wouldn't have had to show it, but it's a little bit further out, so it's a little sliver of that side. And then this one, I can already tell it's going to run through the shape, so I'm not going to put that one. And then shortening it up again, because right now it's stretching till the great beyond. Let's take our ruler and shorten it up. So this side becomes the marker for the thickness of the other side. So line up my ruler, pull it back. Same thing with this one, pull it back. Ta-da! Now this is where things are going to get a little more challenging. If I want to make it look like there's a window cut out of it, I could recreate this same shape, or I could make my own shape. But let's say I wanted to kind of mimic this shape a little bit. So I'm putting like a smaller version of it. I'm going to make this look hollow. But it's not paper thin like this one. So I'm just making like a mini one in here. There we go. So this becomes, I want to make it look like there's a piece missing, but it's got these edges here. I would check all the corners. All of these run into this shape here, but this one, we're going to choose the opposite. So all of these run into this shape, but I want to see this one here. Connect that corner. Then we see the inside of the form, just like we did here. It's kind of like the opposite a little bit. So this becomes the inside. I'm going to shade it. It kind of makes it easier to see the illusion. So this becomes like the wall and the top part of the ceiling. And then these are all the sides. So that's how you could make that look hollow. So for example, I think somebody could be standing on top here of the form. Somebody could be standing up here too. This becomes the ceiling where he's standing inside there. Okay. All right. Now looking at this is probably like a 2-day thing for you guys. So you know, our activity for today, let's see how far you guys get. If any of these get a little too complicated, let me know and we'll work it out. So this is just about getting used to some of these different forms and using the vanishing point. So let's see how you did.